In this volume and its continuation, we are going to talk about the major events that occurred during the Indian national movement. The second half of the 19th century witnessed the culmination of the national political consciousness and the growth of an organized national movement in India. There were many causes responsible for the rise of the national movement, and we are going to discuss at length the major causes which led to the movement. By bringing the whole of India under their domination, the British gave a political unity which it had not known for the last so many centuries. India was not so completely united even when the Mughals were at their zenith. With the advent of the British imperialism, India became one, and Indians from different parts of the country began to understand one another. The major factors responsible for this unification of Indians were the introduction of a uniform and modern system of government throughout the country and the introduction of the railways, telegraph, and a uniform postal system, which brought the different parts of the country together and promoted mutual contact among the people. The contact with foreign countries was one among the major reasons which led to the rise of Indian national movement. As a result of the British supremacy in India, the Indians came into close contact with the various European countries, and gradually they began to be influenced by the European revolutionaries. The 19th century in Europe was a century of nationalism and liberalism, so it was bound to affect the Indians. The English was made the medium of instruction of education in the year 1835. It became the lingua franca of educated Indians. It broke the barriers of religions and regions as well. Along with it, they came in contact with the Western ideas. The ideas of liberty, equality, democracy, socialism, etc. infiltrated into their minds. It was these English-educated Indians who led the national movement. In order to crush the revolt of 1857, the British committed such atrocities that Indians were completely shaken. The Indians came to the conclusion that all their sufferings could be removed only if somehow the British were turned out of the country. British drained the resources of India in a more systemic and unjust way. They came to India as traders and remained here as traders whose primary aim was always financial gain. The balance of trade was always unfavorable to India. The Industrial Revolution in England necessitated import of raw material from foreign countries and extensive market for its manufacture outside. This resulted in the destruction of Indian handicraft and cottage industry, heavy pressure on agriculture, and ever-growing impoverishment of the people. For all these sufferings and economic miseries, the people blamed the British and made every possible plan to get rid of them. In the 19th century, a large quantity of national literature in the form of novels, essays, and patriotic poetry was created, which brought about a great revolution in the minds of the people and inspired them to fight against British imperialism. The Indian press also contributed in arousing the national consciousness among the people of India. Newspapers like the Indian Mirror, Bombay Samachar, Amrut Bazar Patrika, Hindu, Kesari, and several others had a great influence on the political life of the country. The impact of socio-religious reform movements was much on the rise of Indian national movement. Indirectly, these socio-religious reforms or movements contributed to the rise of nationalism. Rajaram Mohan Roy, Swami Vivekanand, Swami Dayanand, and Mrs. Annie Besant were all patriots. They survived the glory of ancient India, created faith among the people. All these developments gave a sociological as well as psychological base to the Indian national movement. Railways, telegraph, wireless, postal services, construction of roads and canals all facilitated communication. All these brought people nearer to each other and provided the facility to organize the national movement on an all-India level. The Anglo-Afghan War affected the country badly in economic field. The Delhi Darbar of 1877, at the time of Great Famine and various acts like Vernacular Press Act of 1878, reduction in the age limit for entry in Indian civil services. All these created widespread discontentment among the Indians. The Ilbert Bill sought to empower Indian district magistrates and session judges to try Europeans in criminal cases. The Europeans living in India launched a vociferous campaign against the bill, compelling the Viceroy Ripon to order its withdrawal. This episode made the politically conscious Indians learn two lessons. That is, the British would not easily shed their racial arrogance. The government would not concede any of their demands unless they too organized themselves and carried on a persistent struggle. The personal arrogance of Lord Curzon, his haughty language, and some reactionary administrative measures like Calcutta University Act and Local Self-Government Act seriously injured the feelings of the Indians. Above all, partition of Bengal created widespread discontentment. The use of Swadeshi goods and boycott of foreign goods were adopted, which helped in spreading the Indian nationalism. In theory, the British government declared that no racial discrimination would be made against the Indians, but in actual practice, the evil was always there. Practically, all high posts went to the British and the Indians were debarred from them. Moreover, the British in India were very arrogant in their attitudes. They regarded Indians as something of inferior breed and ridiculed them as the black heathens. The Indians could not tolerate such a humiliation and so made up their minds to fight against the British imperialism. Till now, we've been talking about the various reasons which led to the rise of Indian national movement. Let us now discuss about certain early political associations which were formed before the rise of Indian national movement. The Bangabasa Prakasika Sabha was the first political association formed in the year 1836. The Landholders' Society was founded at Calcutta in the year 1838 with the narrow aim of protecting the class interests of the Zamindars of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. The British India Society was founded by William Adams in England in the year 1839 to create an awareness among his fellow countrymen about Indian affairs. The Bengal British India Society was a branch of British India Society formed in Bengal in April 1843 under George Thomson. The aim of the society was to secure the rights of the Indian people through peaceful means. The British Indian Association was established on 29th October 1851. The Landholders' Society and the Bengal British India Society merged together to form the British Indian Association with the object of revising the civil administration and protecting the welfare of the people. Radhakant Dev was its first president. The Madras Native Association was founded in the year 1852. The Bombay Association was also founded in the year 1852. Kindly note, both the Madras Native Association and the Bombay Association were together founded in the year 1852. In the year 1866, Dadabhai Naoroji, the Grand Old Man of India, organized the East India Association in London to discuss Indian questions and to influence British public opinion. He showed that the poverty and economic backwardness of India were not inherent in local conditions, but were caused by colonial rule which was draining India of its wealth and capital. The Pune Sarvajanik Sabha was founded in the year 1867. Justice N.G. Ranade, Ganesh Vasudev Joshi, F.H. Chiplankar and others organized the Pune Sarvajanik Sabha. The Sabha carried on active political education for the next 30 years. The Indian League was founded in September 1875 by Sisir Kumar Gose. The Indian League was superseded by the Indian Association, founded in Calcutta on July 26, 1876, by Surendranath Banerjee and Anand Mohan Bose. It is the only pre-Congress organization which aspired to operate on an all-India level and therefore the only true forerunner of the Indian National Congress. Its aims were to arouse the political consciousness of the people and to unite them on a common political program. The Bengali, a daily newspaper founded by Surendranath Banerjee, became the chief organ of the association. It organized agitations against a reduction of the maximum age limit for the civil service examination, the Arms Act and the Vernacular Act. It sponsored an All-India National Conference at Calcutta in December 1883. The second conference was convened in the year 1885 and it merged with the Congress in the year 1886. We've been talking about the major association at length. Let us now have a look about certain other associations too. In the year 1884, M. Veeraraghavachari, G. Subramanya Iyer, Anand Charlu and others formed the Madras Mahajan Sabha. In Bombay, Feroz Shah Mehta, K.T. Telang, Badruddin Tyabji and others formed Bombay Presidency Association in the year 1885. The time was now ripe for the formation of an all-India political organization of the nationalists who felt the need to unite politically against the common enemy, foreign rule and exploitation. Let us now talk at length about the first phase of the national movement, which extended from the year 1885 to the year 1905. Please remember, the first phase of the national movement extended between 1885 and 1905. The Indian National Congress was founded in the year 1885 by Allen Octavian Hume, a retired English civil servant. Its first session at Bombay in December 1885 was presided over by W.C. Banerjee and attended by 72 delegates. There was a great controversy about the object, which prompted Allen Octavian Hume to take the step. Recent researchers have shown that this idea was the result of discussions between Allen Octavian Hume and Lord Dufferin. He suggested him to organize a political body which would act in much the same kind of way as the opposition party did in Britain. So their primary aim was to provide an outlet, a safety for the British rule in India. Hume himself expressed a safety for the escape of great and growing forces generated by our own action was urgently needed. It is important to note at this stage that safety valve theory is only a small part of the truth and is totally inadequate and misleading as an explanation of the foundation of the Indian National Congress. This at the most explains to a limited extent Hume's role in the episode. More than anything else, the National Congress represented the urge of the politically conscious Indians to set up a national organization to work for their political and economic advancement. They cooperated with Hume because they did not want to arouse official hostility to their early political efforts, and they hoped that a retired civil servant's active presence would allay official suspicions. If Hume wanted to use Congress as a safety valve, the early Congress leaders hoped to use him as a lightning conductor. The early aims of the Congress, as declared by its President W.C. Banerjee in the first session, were the promotion of the personal intimacy and friendship among all the earnest workers in our country's cause in the various parts of the empire, eradication of prejudice of race, color, creed and region among the people of India, leading to a fuller development and consolidation of sentiments of national unity, to record and give expression to the material opinion of the educated classes of India on important and pressing socio-political issues through discussion and deliberation, and finally to chart the course which the Indian leaders and politicians should adopt to promote public interest. Coming to the era of moderates, which extended from the year 1885 to the year 1905. In its early years, the Congress was not a mass organization. It included simply intellectual, educated persons of middle grades and business bourgeois who had complete faith in justice of the British and did not talk of independence. These moderate nationalists at the most demanded self-rule as existed in other British colonies. The prominent leaders of the era were Dadabhai Naoroji, Badruddin Tyabji, Feroz Shah Mehta, Surendranath Banerjee, R.C. Dutt, Anand Mohan Bose, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Justice N.G. Ranade, Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Madan Mohan Malavya. The basic aims of the early nationalist leaders were to lay the foundations of a secular and democratic national movement, to politicize and politically educate the people, to form the headquarters of the movement, that is, to form an all-India leadership group and to develop and propagate an anti-colonial nationalist ideology. The methods of the moderates were constitutional. They aimed at reforming the administration of the country gradually through 3 P's, that is, petition, prayers and protest. Their methods can be summed up briefly as constitutional agitation within the 4 corners of the law and slow, orderly political progress. Though ostensibly these petitions were addressed to the government, their real aim was to educate the Indian people. Let us now get to know about the program of the moderates. Perhaps the most important contribution of the moderates to the development of the national movement in India was their economic critique of colonialism. They clearly grasped that the essence of British economic imperialism lay in the subordination of the Indian economy to the British economy. They blamed the British for the destruction of India's indigenous industries and demanded the development of modern industries and their promotion through tariff protection, financial aid and other methods. As their own contribution towards promoting Indian industries, they popularized the Swadeshi or the use of Indian goods and the boycott of English goods. They also demanded a reduction in land revenue and military expenditure, abolition of salt tax and improved working conditions for plantation workers. Perhaps the most powerful weapon in the nationalist armory of anti-imperialist criticism was that of the drain theory. Dadabhai in his book Poverty and Un-British Rule in India analyzed the causes of India's poverty under British rule and put the draining of wealth from India by the British as one of the factors responsible for India's poverty. The most important administrative reform for which the moderates agitated was the Indianization of the higher grades of the administrative services. They demanded the separation of the judiciary from executive so that the people might get some protection from the arbitrary acts of the police and the bureaucracy. The early nationalists put up a strong defense of the civil rights, namely the freedom of speech, freedom of press, thought and association whenever the government tried to curtail them. They vehemently opposed the Vernacular Press Act of 1878 till it was repealed in the year 1882. Let us now discuss about certain constitutional reforms. By expanding and reforming the existing Legislative Council. Under popular pressure, the government passed the Indian Councils Act of 1892, which increased the number of non-official members, a few of whom were to be indirectly elected. Members were also given the right to speak on the budget, but not the right to vote upon it. The Indians were, however, utterly disappointed by these reforms and they raised the slogan, "No taxation without representation." By the beginning of the 20th century, the moderates demanded full self-government, including Indian control over all legislation and finances, on the model of the self-governing colonies of Canada and Australia. Dadabhai Naoroji was the first Indian to use the word Swarajya for this demand at the Calcutta session of Congress in the year 1906. The early nationalists urged the government to undertake and develop welfare activities of the state. They demanded greater facilities for technical and higher education and the extension of medical and health facilities. They also took up the cause of Indian workers who had migrated to British colonies. Let us now get to know something about the attitude of the government. From the beginning, the government was hostile to the development of nationalist forces. It came down heavily on the Indian press in the year 1878 when it tried to spread nationalist consciousness through criticism of colonial policies. In the year 1897, B.G. Tilak and some other leaders were arrested and put on trial on charges of spreading disaffection against the government through their speeches and writings. The Natu brothers were deported without trial on similar charges. Vicious Brahmins and violent villains. The Congress was described as a factory of sedition and the congressmen as disappointed candidates for office and discontented lawyers who represent no one but themselves.
the British authorities pushed further the policy of divide and rule to counter the growing nationalist movement. They encouraged Syed Ahmed Khan, Raja Prasad and other pro-British individuals to start an anti-Congress movement. By putting the achievements of moderates in a nutshell, we see the promotion of Indian nationalism, national awakening and political education, creating consciousness among people about their common nationality, providing a link between the people and government, the passing of Indian Council Act of 1892, and exposing the wrongs of the government, and finally laying the foundation of the Indian freedom movement. Till now, we have dealt at length with the first phase of the Indian national movement. Let us now come to the second phase of the Indian national movement, which started from the year 1905 to the year 1919. The failure of the British government to accept any of the important demands of the nationalists produced disillusionment among the politically conscious people with the principles and methods of the dominant moderate leadership. Instead of conciliating the moderate nationalists, the British rulers denigrated and looked down upon them. Consequently, there was a strong demand for more vigorous political action and methods than those followed by the moderates. At the end of the 19th century, a few leaders like Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal and Aurobindo Ghosh, having a radical outlook, imparted a new vigor to the nationalist struggle and advocated active resistance to the British imperialism. Let us now sort out the various causes which led to the rise of militant nationalism. Politically conscious Indians were soon convinced that the purpose of the British rule was to exploit India economically. The political events of the years 1892 to 1905 also disappointed the nationalists and made them think of more radical politics. Tilak was arrested in the year 1897 and sentenced to 18 months rigorous imprisonment on a charge of treason. The Nattu brothers were deported in the year 1897 without being tried. The people thus realized that instead of giving wider political rights, the rulers were taking away even their few existing rights. Besides, the British officials became suspicious of higher education and tried to discourage its spread by bringing the Indian universities under tighter official control. By the end of the 19th century, a large number of educated Indians worked in the administration on extremely low salaries, while many others increasingly faced unemployment. The unrest of the educated masses grew sharply during the reign of Lord Curzon, who declared in 1904 that the highest ranks of civil employment must, as a general rule, be held only by the Englishmen. Such a blatant view of racial arrogance made a cruel mockery of the promise embodied in Queen Victoria's proclamation of the year 1858. The defeat of the gigantic Russia in its aggressive war against Japan in the year 1904 and the rout of Italians at Adowa in the year 1896 at the hands of Abyssinians proved that the Europeans had no inherent superiority over the people of the East and shattered the myth of white invincibility. Besides, the revolutionary movements in Ireland, Russia, Egypt, Turkey and China and the Boer War in South Africa convinced the Indians that united people willing to make sacrifices could challenge even the most powerful of despotic governments. Leaders like Tilak, Aurobindo Ghosh and Swami Vivekananda played a crucial role in this respect. Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, Aurobindo Ghosh and Lajpat Rai, through their writings, taught Indians to be proud of their country and its culture and gave a new edge to the Indian nationalism. A militant nationalist school of thought had existed in the country from almost the beginning of the national movement. This school was represented by leaders like Rajnarayan Bose and Ashwin Kumar Dutt in Bengal and Vishnu Shastri Chiplankar in Maharashtra. The most outstanding representative of this school was Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Through his newspapers, Maratha and Kesari, he preached nationalism. the nationalists firmly opposed the partition of Bengal in the year 1905. They saw that it was a deliberate attempt to divide the Bengalis territorially and on religious grounds. The anti-partition movement was initiated on 7th August 1905, which gave a fillip to the militant nationalism. The important extremist leaders were Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai and Bipin Chandra Pal. The political goal of the extremists was Swaraj, which was spoken first of all by Tilak. However, their Swaraj was not different from the idea of self-government as existed in the self-governing colonies of the British Empire. The militant nationalists believed that Indians themselves must work out their own salvation and make the effort to rise from degraded position. They declared that great sacrifices and sufferings were needed for this task. They therefore pressed for political work among the masses and for direct political action by the masses.